Good morning, everyone. It's Good Friday. Bluntly, in the church's life, a day to talk about death. And how appropriate that, as we look at the numbers of people who are dying around the world, as we look at the way that COVID-19 has taken over every statistic in terms of who's dying from everything. The many people who are dying from all kinds of other things just seem to be forgotten today. So we gather as Christians, we gather around the story of the death of Jesus, and we ask what that means, and we ask what it asks of us. And in terms of that first question, what does it mean? That's a conversation that could last a very long time. The second question, what does the death of Jesus ask of us, is something I want to spend a few minutes with this morning. In 2003, early in that year, I flew back from South Africa to the United Kingdom, having tied up loose ends there, to come back to not quite begin a new life here, but to be settled here for a period of time that I didn't know how long. I didn't know how long it would be, and I know now that's permanent. On the plane on the way over, I did not sleep at all. It's a flight through the night. I'm 6'5". If you've never seen me in the flesh, I don't fit well on public transport anyway. But it was a tumultuous time in my life. I was about to become a father for the first time. All kinds of things were going on. So I watched movies on the plane, and one of those films was Gangs of New York, and it horrified me. Just the opening sequence of this incredibly violent gang fight in New York between two rival gangs, which has one of the main protagonists, walking through this incredibly bloody, physical, visceral battle between men and women, and sticking a knife into the leader of the opposing gang. And as he lies dying, his little boy comes running through and comes to him, and he takes a blood-soaked hand and holds his son's face and says to this little boy, "Don't ever look away." I've just watched it again on YouTube, just that opening clip, and it's affected me again. It's incredibly violent, and I guess about to become a parent then, and being a parent now, and imagining that kind of moment for that father, that son, and what he maybe meant in the violence of a gang, about toughness and about, I don't know, not looking away. Today is a day that asks of us all to not look away. And of course, in the church, we want today to be a day in which we don't look away from the suffering of Jesus, which is extraordinary, but not perhaps uniquely so, although some would argue that it is. People are going through extraordinary suffering and dying and trauma and hunger and destitution all around us, all around the world, every day. And the challenge of the cross of Jesus is in many ways to not look away. We are so good at looking away. We are so good at changing channels. There's a song by Crowded House, "Don't Dream It's Over." And one of the lines is, "And the papers today tell of war and of waste, but you turn right over to the TV page." And understandably so. At times we have to escape. We have to escape into humor, into insignificant things, because if we tried to hold our gaze upon the world and its suffering and its pain and its trauma in all the ways that those are so very real for millions of people on a daily basis, we would be spent very quickly. And I still cannot begin to understand the courage and just the sheer force of good and strength of character in so many ways in those who are war correspondents and correspondents in times of natural disaster, who bring us the images, who bring us the stories of a world that asks us not to look away. And quite often the person who's in front of the camera gets all kinds of plaudits, but could you imagine holding those cameras? Holding a camera to film a child dying. And have to make sense of not intervening. Of course, there is a price to pay, and in South Africa's story and in many people's stories, those who choose not to look away and help us to do that together pay the price in many ways for that, in their own mental health, their own relationships, their own breakdown, quickly or slowly over time, because we cannot be unaffected by the things we see if we are people who have any compassion or who are moved by any other experience that is trauma and pain. On the 25th of March, the second day that I did these recordings, it was 9 months to Christmas. It was the Feast of the Annunciation, and you can go back and watch that video again, or for the first time if you'd like to. And I talked then about Mary choosing to bear the pain, that those 9 months were about her in her body and in her soul and in her life, choosing to partner with God in bearing the pain of the world. And of course the angels' words to her are stark, and a sword will pierce your soul too. And so we come to Good Friday and we find ourselves thinking about Jesus on the cross, and questions about heaven and hell and what this unlocks and opens. Those are good questions. They're not, however, in the way that I want to use this reflection, questions for today. Jesus is in solidarity with those who are crucified by the Roman government, in collusion perhaps with the religious authorities more often than is reported, to do away with the little people who are problems, to make a public spectacle of them, to do that not quietly, but to do that on a hill in front of a crowd. And thank God we are no longer in a world where there is very much appetite for public execution. Don't look away. Don't look away is so many ways the message of today. And who is it that we find at the foot of the cross? We find the women. We find Mary, the mother of Jesus, and other women who have traveled with Jesus through his ministry. His disciples, the men, they've run away. Understandably, let's not give them a hard time for that. But in their fear, they've run away. But Mary follows through on her commitment to bear the pain of the life of Jesus, in the death of Jesus. She follows through on that, and she doesn't look away. She doesn't look away. The other person who doesn't look away is the centurion, who is reported to say when Jesus dies, surely this man was the Son of God. I'm told, and I've read that it's when the film was made, one of the films that was made early on, John Wayne played that centurion as a young man, and when they'd filmed a scene, the director said to him, "Could you film it with more awe?" And they started filming again. He said, "Oh, surely this man was the Son of God." Yeah. But there are people who stay. There are people who watch. And there are people who watch because they're curious. There are people who watch because this is sport. For Mary and the women, they watch because they choose not to look away. And I wonder what will become of our shared humanity because of this COVID outbreak. I wonder what will become of our ability not to look away, whether that will grow or whether that will return to the frankly generalized denial of real suffering in the world around us. And I make no judgment because I take part in that myself. I change the channels. The UNICEF ad comes on the TV with a starving child, and my heart, my gut, my life, my soul as a parent just can't look at it for very long. But that's what we're asked to do. Not all the time, but more and more, to not look away and to see what we can do. To not let our governments and our authorities get away with some of the things they get away with. To to not turn a blind eye in any way. Not that we become the world's police, but that we bear the pain together. And because of that, and what that does to us, and what that drives us towards in action and joint shared responsibility in some way for the place in which we live, whether it's a little patch like Haxby and Wigginton or York, or whether it's a nation or the world, we learn not to look away, and not to look away, and not to look away. When South Africa went through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission process, I kept newspaper articles from all sides of the political spectrum. I attended hearings myself. I had the privilege of working with some who'd given testimony at some of those hearings as victims later on. But I have to say, the vast majority of white South Africa just looked away, and I think hoped and even prayed that the TRC would somehow happen away off somewhere in the distance, and everything would be all right in the end, and that sufficient justice would be served, and sufficient sufficient attention would be given to the fact of our history, that we would then be able to just move on. But of course that meant, for many of those people, moving on with their lives largely unchanged, when in fact the power and the gift and the truth of the reconciliation process, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission process in South Africa, was to hold up a story to the whole country and say, don't look away, listen to this, pay attention to this, hear this, be moved by this, be shocked by this, be outraged by this, be ashamed by this. And then let's ask who we are together, having not looked away from where we've been and who we've been, whoever we've been. Whatever colour our skins have been, whatever our place or part has been in the taking part in or the looking away in the apartheid years. Don't look away. That is so powerfully the challenge of the cross for us. And I want to read just a little piece by a colleague who is gone now. Damn it. Sorry. I want to read a little piece by a colleague, Jonathan Dean, who's in London, who wrote a piece yesterday that I read on exactly this theme, not looking away. And he wrote this: I want to suggest that the church has a great responsibility in these times to be on the front line of those not looking away. This isn't to suggest that we don't need to take our own mental health and self-care seriously. The women acted together as a small intentional community so as to comfort and uphold each other in unbearable trauma. But we are already realizing, if we are looking, the extent to which COVID-19 is offering us a troubling reflection of the state we're still in today. Its effects will overwhelmingly fall on the poorest, the most vulnerable and the marginalized, in the UK and overseas. The economic downturn it will engender will ask searching questions of how we structure our economies and protect the least secure. We have been offered a glimpse of how much we owe to some of the lowest paid and least valued workers, just as they are being discriminated against, in immigration law and elsewhere. And we have been offered a searching, heart-rending reminder of our interdependence and mutual belonging. No one can be self-sufficient right now. These things cannot be just the latest shallow tabloid campaign or a momentary passing point to notice. The future of humanity rests on us looking at them, full on, and prayerfully asking, so then, what now? So whatever you make of the Easter story of the death and resurrection of Jesus, today we live with the fact of his death, a matter of historical record. We can talk about resurrection on Sunday and bring our minds to that. But today we see these women who in Mary at least began all those years ago, choosing to bear the pain. And we ask how we bear the pain together today. There's more than just and I make no judgment in this, But there's more than banging a pot at 8 o'clock in the evening for healthcare workers whose lives we have invested much self-interest in. There's more to our gratitude, there's more to our responsibility, there's more to our community mindedness, there's more to our citizenship of the world than that, or anything else that is about the daily small kindnesses that are part of us being civil, at least during this time. So Good Friday to you, whatever it means to you. I'm going to leave you, and I couldn't embed it in the video because it wouldn't work, but I'm going to leave you with a link to watch a video on YouTube, which is a beautifully dramatized in stop motion animation version of Pink Floyd's song On the Turning Away, which says all the things I've said in about 5 minutes and far more powerfully. Crank the volume up, it's worth it. It's a moving piece of music. If you don't have the words, find the words and have them printed or alongside in case you miss any. But it is an anthem call to not turn away, and I offer it to you in that spirit. So bless you. Have a good Friday. So if you want to watch the Pink Floyd video, which I'd really suggest you do, the screen that comes after this will show a clip from the beginning of the video, or just a screenshot, but the link in the middle is not clickable. You can't just click through to it. I can't do that on this video editing software, so you'll need to cut that and paste that, or use the link that was in the description of this video on Facebook, at least, if you were looking at it through Facebook. I hope you moved by it, I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you watch it more than once.